Hey, hello, and good day to everyone. In today's episode of Growing Your Tree of Prosperity, I'm going to talk a little bit about investing in spin offs before I do a shallow dive into one of the companies that I think might potentially uh, produce capital gains because of this spin off thematic play. Okay, so what is a spin off? So recently, I've noticed that there's been a very profitable strategy in Singapore when investors invest in companies that spin off new assets. This new asset could come in the form of a new company or a real estate investment trust. So there are three very interesting examples. First is a while ago, Yangzixiang Shipbuilding announced the spin-off of its investment segment into Yangzixiang Financial Holdings. That made a lot of money for people that patiently just held on to both companies at the same time. All right. And now LHN is going to do a spin-off of its Collywood co-living brand into a main board stock. And LHN was a two-bagger for me. And finally, Centurion is also trying to spin off worker accommodation assets into Centurion Accommodation REIT. So collectively, these companies are trying to unlock hidden value that is within the company for shareholders, which is why has been very profitable for many local investors. All right. Now, why are spin-offs profitable? Well, likely because there is a sharper strategic focus, so managers are more aligned with business performance. All right. Another reason could be a spin-off can target niche investors. For example, you as a dividends investor, you might not want to invest in Centurion or LHN, but you might want to invest in the real estate investment trust that contains these worker accommodation or co-living assets. All right. And finally, what I've noticed is that these special situation plays tend to behave in an uncorrelated manner compared to benchmarks like the STI. So having a certain amount of your capital dedicated to these spin-off plays can actually be very profitable for people who are the usual dividends people, the folks who invest in banks as well as real estate investment trusts. Okay, and the chart for Yangzixiang, LHN, and Centurion speaks for itself. Okay, so this sort of gives us an idea of what's really fun to play in the markets. If you have more like of a trader kind of mentality, okay, so these plays have a tendency to be 3 to 6 months holding period. They don't generate a lot of dividends for you, okay, although you will get some dividends because when I got into LHN and Centurion, I went in as a yield investor. Okay, so let's do our shallow dive. The shallow dive that we are doing, I believe, is the next spin-off play, and it's a company that's been around since 1828, and the company is known as Boustead. So Boustead Singapore is a diversified engineering and investment group listed on SGX. Its core business, real estate solutions, energy, infrastructure, engineering, and geospatial technology. If you break down its revenue, majority of their revenue still comes from real estate solutions, okay? But do take note that the geospatial component, 27.7%, is what gets a lot of Boustead investors excited, all right, followed by energy engineering, okay? The market capitalization for a stock that is so old isn't particularly large, all right, 835.8 million. The price to book value is, I wouldn't consider it cheap as well. But the price earnings ratio is very reasonable at 8.7, so it's a little bit of a value play. And it also produces very high margins of 18%. And my guess is because of the geospatial component. Because they are some sort of like the group that holds the software licenses for ESRI and these geospatial kind of applications. All right. So it's a little bit of a tech company and a real estate company at the same time. So it's not easy for an analyst to break the company down into individual parts, okay, because the businesses are a little bit diverse, okay. But what gets people very excited today is that they are actively pursuing a spin-off of their logistics and industrial real estate They're trying to spin it off into a REIT. So formal filings are underway, and there's a lot of investor enthusiasm. So it's something that you could pick up now, add it into your portfolio. And I've done a very big position in Boustead lately, okay, for that reason. Okay, so this is a value play. It has tailwinds from the MES EQDP. It is a small cap stock, and now it is a special situation stock. Okay, so let's look at its dividends potential. It pays twice in August and November every year, about 7.5 cents over the past 12 months. The yield isn't particularly fantastic, 3.24%. Trailing yields are above 4%. So it's not very high yielding if you enjoy your banks and your real estate investment trust. Okay, but the good news is plenty of free cash flow that supports your payouts, plenty of room to raise dividends in the future. So this is a very interesting value stock and a special situations play. Okay, historical returns are not too bad. For the past 10 years, it has generated superior returns compared to the STI, but likely because of these recent events. Okay, drawdown is relatively high, so the risk is going to be there. But like all the other stocks I've mentioned earlier, anything with a spin-off play generally has a low correlation against our benchmark. Okay, so quite an interesting satellite counter to add to your usual portfolio of Singapore stocks, all right? So, because it's got some ability to diversify your holdings. And obviously, if you have a spin-off play, the annual skew is positive, which means that it is a little bit like a lottery ticket where there is a very heavy upside and the upside is skewed to the right. Okay, so something which I think a lot of investors like. So how do we think about Boustead? This is a stock that's on a lot of investors' radar now because of the REIT spin-off. Okay, and so this is the most important news that you want to follow, right? Its strength comes from the high profit margins and recurring income from real estate and geo-spatial software licensing from ESR. Okay, so the geo-spatial software licensing, it's the ability, 27.7% of the revenue is very stable and it comes from software licenses. Okay, yeah, but of course you need to look at this space very carefully. If they lose the rights to the licensing, then it'll be very, very bad news for the company. Okay, weaknesses is that it's got a small market cap, and because the mix of businesses are very diverse, there is this thing known as a conglomerate discount, because analysts simply don't have the brain power to value every single segment of the company. Okay, so it will always be slightly cheaper than if you were to break the company down into many parts, hence the single-digit PE ratio. The opportunity is obvious. It is the REIT spin-off. And some of the threats include cyclicality, and if the spin-off doesn't materialize, then you'll be in for a very hard time. Okay, like every spin-off plays, a spin-off that fails to succeed, right, doesn't get approval, or somehow gets cancelled, that could affect the valuation of the stock quite adversely. Okay, so what do you need to do before you make a decision? If you decide that you want to consider Boustead, you want to start on due diligence, okay, you might have to go in and really understand the different product lines, okay, and you have to somehow understand how the real estate business works, the energy business works, and the geospatial business, all right, and especially the real estate business, right, it actually is a large proportion of the revenues that you receive. Okay, now alternatively, you just watch the news on the spin-off like a hawk. When you make an application to spin a REIT off, there will be various approvals that will be given by the authorities. Every time an approval takes place, expect the stock price to adjust accordingly, okay? Because the probability of the spin-off will then go up, right? If the probability of the spin-off goes up, the price will be adjusted accordingly. But if the probability of the spin-off goes down, then the price will be adjusted downwards, okay? All right, and enjoy the ride, right? Because the equity development program, more money is going to come in, and we have now very good news that there's going to be a new index that's going to be born to supplement as STI. So perhaps with new exchange traded funds, dedicated to mid-cap and small-cap counters in Singapore, you could be seeing more liquidity flow into these middle-sized or small-sized companies like Boustead. Okay, so with that, if you like my content, subscribe to my channel. You can buy me a coffee at this link. If you want to listen to my life story and figure out how the FIRE movement works, then Google ERM intro and take the first link, and I'll see you on the next video. Thank you very much.